in the past year, my home office has also become known as the trains and cars room. I spend a lot of time in there, both for work and on the floor with my 3-year-old playing. Now, there's a motif, a storyline that gets repeated again and again and again in my child's imaginative play. And in the trains and cars room, it goes down like this. There is a bad car being chased by a good car. And when I ask Elliot, why is the car bad? He says, because it stole dog food. I say, okay. And this plays out with every configuration of toys in every room of the house. In the other room with the Paw Patrol toys, there is a good dog and a bad dog. And surprisingly, there's no dog food being stolen there. But in the bathtub, there's a good boat and a bad boat. And lo and behold, the bad boat stole dog food. It's fun to have this kind of play, and it's something that we do in our culture from an exceedingly young age. I can assure you I did not teach Elliot good car, bad car. He picked it up from daycare, from maybe the TV that I let him watch. It's deep in our psyche, this notion that there are good guys and bad guys. And when it comes to a plot, you need some conflict. And having an adversary is kind of fun. Playing chase is kind of fun. It's what drives the story. But it creates a dangerous worldview. As Elliot plays good car, good guy, good boat, bad boat, I'm constantly intervening and asking, why is the boat bad? Because it stole dog food. And so then I say, well, let's call it a robber or a thief or a villain. He really likes the word villain. But trying to separate out this idea of people from their actions. This is dangerous to label some people as bad. And we can think of lots of different examples of why. One example sticks in my heart. In 2016, I was a teacher in a high school, somewhat diverse high school, with lots of different kinds of people from different countries around the world. And in 2016, the term bad hombres was used to refer to undocumented immigrants. We know what happened from there. By June 2017, immigrant children were separated from their parents at the border without any means of tracking or plan to reunite them with their families. And by January of 2020, the official government count of children separated from their parents or guardians from these bad hombres, there were 4,368 children separated from their families. This is what happens when we use dehumanizing language. When we dehumanize, we create distance between ourselves and the other. For surely we are the good guys and they are the bad guys. But that can't be true for all of us. And in fact, it can't be true. When we dehumanize, we kill compassion. We kill empathy. We allow ourselves to not care because we can write these people off as other. If the other is labeled bad, or as in our people's history, dirty, we can separate ourselves from them. We can turn a blind eye to whatever happens to them. But we are all human, and we are commanded to treat each other as such. We are not allowed to look away. Our parsha today, Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem, Atem, plural, like as in y'all, you all stand here today. Kulchem, it's a repetition. Atem should have done it. It means you all. But kulchem means all of you. If you notice, we repent in the collective. Asham nu. We have done these things. Hashivein u. Return us. Avinu. our parent. The collective is present constantly in our tradition. It is, in fact, quite rare that there is an individual prayer. We find it more frequently in the weekday service, but especially on these high holy days, we are a collective. That means the ones that we agree with and the ones we disagree with. But we stand as one unit, especially on this day. The Ashamnu teaches us about collective responsibility and indeed solidarity. We can date this prayer back. The first form of it appeared in a prayer book in the 8th century, but it comes from the book of Daniel, which is the final book of our Tanakh. Daniel says, I prayed to the eternal my God, confessing, O eternal, great and awesome God, who stays faithful to the covenant with those who love God and keep the commandments. We have sinned. We have gone astray. We have acted wickedly. We have been rebellious. Yes, it's about responsibility. It's also about solidarity, for standing with those people who have done the things that we have not done, for they stand with us as we confess the things we have done that they have not. It is a community of responsibility. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory, in March of 2020, gave an interview for his then new book called Morality, Restoring the Common Good in Divided Times. At its core, Rabbi Sachs argues, we have moved very largely from a we society to an I society. He describes this as the cultural equivalent of climate change. He explains there have been 3 successive waves of causation. Number 1 was the social revolution of the 1960s and was about whatever works for you. Number 2 was the economic revolution of the 1980s, when greed was good and self-interest fueled the economy. And number 3, the latest wave, is the technological revolution, which has put the focus on the self through social media. So, he said, we've been very good on individualism, but much less good on the collective responsibility. It's all been wonderfully liberating, but at the same time, we are now beginning to count the costs. Now, at the time of the book being published, the coronavirus was barely on our radar, certainly not on his. But at the time of this interview, in March of 2020, we were beginning to see the cards and chips fall. He says, there are those who believe that they have an individual right in this moment. Those who escape from quarantine and say, I have a right to my freedom. But freedom, Sachs says, is collective. It is not individual. If we purchase our freedom at the cost of someone else's, the result is not freedom. So he says, I think the coronavirus is going to test our capacity to work for the benefit of others. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs died in November of 2020. He undoubtedly saw this play out, but has not lived to see it continuing to play out. He wrote in March, this situation of putting up with personal inconveniences for the sake of public safety is going to challenge and force us to realize that selfishness is not going to protect us. So back to this word kulchem from our parsha. Orach Chaim, a commentary on the parsha, says that Moses added the word kulchem, all of you, to make plain the mutual responsibility with which he charged each member of the people, and that it applied to one and all. This was the newness of this commandment, of the presentation of the mitzvot. In this parsha, Moses also says, it is not beyond you. Lo b'shamayim hi, it is not in the heavens. It is not across the Yarden. It is close to you. It is in your heart. It is in your mouth. This ability to do tshuva, to turn toward each other. Recently, when I was in a mask-mandated room, someone scoffed at my request to put on his mask, saying, "Whatever, COVID is over." COVID is not over. And we still have a responsibility toward each other, especially those who cannot be vaccinated or who cannot yet be vaccinated. Much like the children who bore the brunt of the dehumanization of illegal immigrants, of those seeking refuge in this country, children too are beginning to bear the brunt of this pandemic. Child hospitalizations are at an all-time high. Children under 12 cannot be vaccinated. Some 50 million children in America. Parents who are vaccinated and become exposed to the virus can carry it home to their children, who can then become sick. A recent article in The Atlantic cited in several states, health workers say that kids, many of them completely healthy, are coming in sicker and deteriorating faster than ever before, with no obvious end in sight. Kids have a much lower risk of getting seriously sick than unvaccinated adults, but lower risk is not no risk. There is no risk. Our task today is teshuvah, turning. Parshat Nitzavim tells us, or says the word to turn in various constructions 7 times. That is no mistake. Whenever the number 7 appears, it harkens us back to our beginnings, to Bereshit, to Genesis, to the creation of the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day God rested. This holy and sacred, complete number of 7. 7 is the number that appears at a wedding as beloveds circle each other 7 times and are offered 7 blessings. So for the word lashuv, for the verb to turn, to appear 7 times in this parsha is no mistake. It's telling us to pay attention and indeed to turn. But Nitzavim is not just about us. Yes, it is about us turning towards God, but also in this text, we hear that God will turn towards us. And in this turning, in the atem and in the kulchem, we must also turn towards each other. We are all responsible for each other. We are all tired. We all have pandemic fatigue. Many of us have compassion fatigue. But the truth is, there is no us and them. Even amidst the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, we are still in this situation together. After I shared this experience with the person who said COVID is over, a parent in our community said, "We in our house behave that until everyone is vaccinated, no one is vaccinated." It's one way of doing tshuva. It's one way of turning outside of ourselves and towards each other. Not only with the pandemic, but in everything. There is no us versus them. There are no good guys and no bad guys. It's only all of us together. There is no other. In a conversation about how these holidays play out with the book of life and the book of death and the book of Hatov and the book of Hara, the ones who are good and the ones who are bad, Reb Kruspadai teaches in the name of Reb Yochanan that there are actually 3 books opened on Rosh Hashanah. The book of holy wicked people, the book of holy righteous people, and then the book of the Beinonim, those in between. The rabbis go on to explain that with rare exception, we all fall into this category. We are all Beinonim. We all miss the mark some of the time. We all cut people off in traffic. We all lose our temper. We all get frustrated. We all hit the mark some of the time too. So we look at the people around us, those of us here in this room, at home, when we're out in the world, and we know that we have a responsibility to each other. And hopefully, we can remind ourselves that it has in fact always been this way. There are just times when it is easier to avoid seeing it. So for those with compassion fatigue, I offer a new way of looking at our actions over the past year. As Hava and I were preparing for these services a few weeks ago, she shared a conversation that she had with Rabbi Fine, talking about this practice of beating our hearts at the Ashamnu as we list all of the ways in which we collectively have missed the mark. And she suggested, rather, what if instead we just hold our hearts? What if we just give ourselves love the way we would a small person, a small child in our lives who broke something or hurt someone or did something wrong and was learning from it? What if we said, yes, dear one, you have gone astray. And yes, dear one, you are still loved. Ashamnu, shh, it's okay. But God knew, I know, dear heart, I know it hurts. And if we can turn that to ourselves, then we can turn it towards each other as well. So that we can bear our communal responsibility with love, act with others in mind, and console ourselves and each other. Ken Yehi Ratzon.